Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Doretha Allen. I am an NBCT. I certified in 2009 Literacy, Reading, Language Arts, Early to Middle Childhood, and I renewed in 2019. I have been a teacher, a an instructional coach, and now I work in central staff in the Office of Transformation and Innovation in Dallas ISD. And I'll pass the mic to my partner in greatness, Margaret.
Thank you, Jaretha. I'm glad everyone was able to join tonight. Good evening, everyone. My name is Margaret Alauskas, and I am from the Boston Public School District. I'm nationally board certified, originally certified in 2017 in English as a new language. My role in the Boston Public School is a teacher, ESL, and resource. And, I hope you gain a lot of information about C2 tonight. Thank you. Today's agenda, we are going to look at the 3 types of writing that National Board calls for. We'll dig deeper in the instructional context, and then also we'll look at writing tips, elements of strong writing, evidence-based writing, and common pitfalls. And then we'll end with a writing activity. So here are the 3 types of writing, and it's really important to understand of what National Board looks for this component as well as others. So one is descriptive, and this helps to set the scene. These are kinds of questions like what, which, describe, state, or list. Another kind of writing is analytical. This is where you give more details and thoughts about the process. You respond to why, and this is also a place where you can explain the significance of your work. And then lastly, the last type of writing is reflective. This is based on what you've learned from past experience and how you will do things differently for your own practice as well as to improve student learning. So with the instructional context, you can go back to what Richard Klein was saying in online, the general portfolio directions, and there's lots of other resources on the website for Candidate Center as well. And if you open this document, we'll give you an overview or an example from that document today, but you'll see an example of the 3 types of writing. Descriptive on its face, but yet sometimes reflective and analytical in practice. And if you look at the key at the top, in this following example, description is shown in bold, analysis writing is shown in underline, and then in a few slides, you'll see some reflective writing shown in italics. So in this first example that's been circled in red, this is description writing. So I'll just read a couple of lines here. My advanced placement AP biology class was a very homogeneous class relative to the rest of the school. In this class, students ranged in age from 16 to 17, with 19 students in the 11th grade and 2 students in the 12th grade. And as you can see, this is just very factual, but yeah, it gives the assessors an understanding of the class composition. And then in the bottom square in red, you can see analytical kind of writing, the underlined one, and I'll read this sample. With the composition of class in mind, I was careful not to assume that my students' learning styles were as similar as their ethnic backgrounds, which motivated me to introduce personality in multiple intelligence surveys. So it's based on the facts, this is what I decided to do with this class at this time. So that's where the analysis comes in, which is a little different than a descriptive writing. So with instructional context, you may find yourself with the National Board questions in the commentary and instructional context to kind of go back and forth between descriptive, analytical, and reflective writing. Your writing will be multifaceted view of your teaching context, and this is the place where you're trying to demonstrate your knowledge of the standards, particularly in your specific certificate component instructions, whatever standards are supposed to be covered. You want to try to portray this as well. And so what's squared on the top is an example of analytical writing. And then that's an example of descriptive writing. And then the bottom is back again to analytical. So you can see how when it's appropriate as a writer to, tell the assessors what's going on in your classroom, you may have to go between this descriptive and analytical writing, and that's okay. And then this last piece is reflective writing. And this is in the italicized. And if you'll get these slides at the end, but then in addition, you could always go to the general portfolio instructions and pull this example, as well as there's some other examples that we didn't put in the slideshow. So I'll read an example here. Looking back to the goals for the activity, I feel that my approach was successful because I was able to modify instruction based on each student's needs. I feel I was successful in helping students contextualize their knowledge of invertebrate organisms in an evolutionary context through thought-provoking questions in an inquiry method of discussion as part of goal 1. So again, it's more reflective, bringing your own thoughts around how the lesson went and what went well as areas for improvement and ways to grow your instruction as a teacher, as well as to keep thinking about how to push students forward and to see that growth. So here are some tips when to use each of the types of writing. When I coach teachers, I represent the Boston Network and candidate support. And we try to tell our teachers who are trying to go through the process to really think about these kinds of writing. And these can also be found in the general portfolio instructions. But some tips to know when to start using descriptive writing is, state, list, describe, what, which. Also confirm that your descriptions are very clear to allow someone who is not familiar with your teaching to visualize and understand what you're describing. So it's important. You should almost assume the assessors don't know anything about your classroom. You want to be descriptive as possible, succinctly, obviously, too. You don't want to go over the page limit, but you want to make sure that you are giving them that background knowledge so that they understand why you're doing every instructional move in your paper. The analytical, this is called for questions that you see like how, why, or in what ways. When you are asked to identify a particular successful moment in a sample of a teaching and to tell why you regard it as successful, you have to analyze. When you are asked for a rationale, you must also analyze. So it's taking the facts and interpreting them and applying them appropriately. And then reflective, this is the place where you are asked what you would do differently. Your response is both an analysis of and a reflection of your practice. So it's really important when we reflect that, even if you have the best lesson, that you think about how else can you still push yourself to do better and how else can you continue to help students, even if they're advanced, what's the next step for them. So a reflective practitioner, it's not just the end, it's kind of like the beginning and how to make students do a better job as well as yourself as a practitioner. So be empowered, not deficient. The instructional context, again, helps to set the stage. This is where you create a picture of your practice, like a visual for your assessor. Some common mistakes when candidates are doing this task is deficit language, describing student challenges, and not really focusing on their strengths. Another area is describing students as special needs and never necessarily referring to them later. And then lastly, exceeding the page limit set by national board, because anytime you go over the page limit, the assessors are going to stop reading once they've hit the page limit. So if you didn't capture what you wanted to say in the page limit and it's like a page or two later, they're not going to be able to read that. So it's really important that you stick to the page limit. Instead of this deficit language, you should be positive and you should have an asset-based sort of language or model to think about your students and your practice. So you want to describe students as strengths and how you're going to use their strengths in order to increase student engagement in your lesson. Describing how you will ensure students' specific content, language, and IEP goals will be met. So knowing what ELD level they may be, what disability they may have, and their accommodations, modifications, how are you going to take that knowledge and ensure that those needs are being met and having a positive lens toward it. And then lastly, keeping within the MB page limit. It's really important. Sometimes when you use so many words and you go over the page limit, that's not necessarily effective. You want to be able to write in an efficient way so that you can convey to the assessors what you're trying to say within the page limits.
Thank you, Margaret. So I want to shift and talk about the elements of strong writing. So there are 3 elements of strong writing for National Board. First, answer all the questions completely. That may seem very simple, but you want to answer all the questions completely. Lisa, would you advance for me? The questions can have 2 to 3 parts. And sometimes there'll be another request after the question. Give a brief sketch, give any other information. This may include the more you share the what, you are using descriptive writing, like Margaret just talked about, and you're demonstrating a knowledge of your students. The more you share the why, you are using analytical writing and demonstrating a level of reflection and providing evidence of the standards. Advance for me a couple of more times, Lisa. So at first glance, it looks like it's simple 4 questions, but there is much, much more here. There are those give a brief sketch. Some of these bullets have 2 and 3 parts to them. So answer all the questions completely. Mommy. Oh, hold on one second. My son is having an issue. Thank you guys for real life is always happening. Real life is always happening. Okay, number 2, part 2 of 3 scoring elements, 3 elements of strong writing. Clear, consistent, and convincing evidence. You want to use your rubrics and your standards. I'm really being deliberate in my speech here. National Board is based on 5 core props. 5 core props gives us the architecture of accomplished teaching, which leads us to the standards. You are evaluated on how well you demonstrate your understanding of the standards. That evaluation is the rubric. Use these 2 documents when you are writing. Okay. All right, we're ready for the next one. All right. So the last one, the architecture of accomplished teaching links. Is what is said about the students aligned with the goals, instruction, assessment and reflection. So in your instructional context that Margaret just went over, if you talk about your students having challenges, but you never address those challenges in their goals or in your instruction or in your assessment or in your reflection, then you've missed the mark. You have missed the mark. So you want to always use this architecture of accomplished teaching. Start with your students and work yourself all the way through that double helix. If you don't like the image on the right, use the table on the left. They're giving you the same information. There's a little bit more about collecting evidence of accomplished teaching on the table, but the whole goal of both of these documents is to make sure that your writing is tightly aligned. You want to have that tight aligned commentary. Okay, so those are the 3 elements of strong writing. So I know you're saying, hey, Dr. Allen, that's good. That example was good, but what does it really look like? What does it really look like? So we want to shift to evidence-based writing, because you will always see or hear about evidence. What's the evidence? What's the evidence? So if you make a claim, you have to have some evidence to back it up. And the claim is what you do with your teaching. The evidence is what did you do? So let's take a look. Just one time, Lisa. So I like to call this evidence-based writing first pass, second pass, first pass, second pass. So I need to make this bigger so I can see it. Okay. All right. So in this first pass, the teacher wrote, establishing a warm learning environment is very important to me. It is also important for student learning. As a result of this, I do many things to build a classroom environment so that students treat each other with kindness. I mean, that sounds great. I've said those things as a teacher. You have probably said those things as a teacher, but let's take a look at the second pass writing with evidence-based. We start the year exploring our multiple intelligences, do brain exercises so students understand how stress affects learning, co-create behavior norms, and hold weekly class meetings. In addition, I greet students as they enter and leave to let them know I am glad they are here. So there is a difference there. So the first pass is very general, very broad brush. They told us, but then in the second pass, they showed us. So they talk about the warm learning environment, but then they spell out the warm learning environment in the second pass. So when we have writing like this that's evidence-based, we are demonstrating an understanding of the standards, and we are showing the assessor how we apply the standards in instruction. And Margaret alluded to this earlier about the assessor. The assessor is our audience. They are the only one who matters because we are making the point to our assessor. Okay, so that was fun. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. All right. So now we're still talking about our evidence-based writing. All right. So let's hit me one time with the first pass, Lisa. All right. I selected Charles because he is intelligent and a great leader in my classroom. He has really good reading and oral skills. All right. I've said that about kids. You've probably said that about kids, but what does it really mean? So let's look at the second pass where they have given us some evidence. Charles is reading 2 levels above grade, writes with detail and clarity, and can sensitively facilitate a group project. Wait a minute. For this writing to happen, they have to first know their students. Every single certificate area standards, knowledge of students is a standard. So on the first pass, Charles is intelligent, but on the second pass, we've quantified that. He's reading 2 grade levels above. He writes with detail and clarity. On the first pass, we say he's a great leader. On the second pass, he can sensitively facilitate a group project. We only know that because we've watched. So now we're digging deeper into this student's skills and we're showing that we know that to the assessor. Okay, let's go with the first pass again. I believe it is important to assess the literacy development of a student initially at the start of the year in order to understand and set individual goals for each student. Sounds great. I've said it as a teacher. You've probably said it as a teacher. We all talk about BOY, the beginning of the year assessment. Of course, we need to have that initial assessment at the beginning of the year, that literacy assessment. But how can we put more evidence in this? Let's take a look at the second pass. To best know their reading skills, I do a running record, discuss what they like to read, and help them set literacy goals. So now I've named that assessment, the running record. I've demonstrated that I'm getting to know them as people, and I'm helping them set literacy goals. So everything that's in the second pass is connecting the instructional decisions made. It ties those instructional decisions to a knowledge of students. And it leaves no question about what or why for teacher moves. All of this evidence base is giving us an understanding, showing an application, understanding and application of the standards, All right, we're ready. Okay, so To do, this is your to-do list. You want to answer the questions, use the standards and your rubrics, make tight connections with the architecture of accomplished teaching, and practice evidence-based writing. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 things to do. So I would be remiss if I didn't give you non-examples of things not to do. So now let's talk about what not to do. So there are common pitfalls in that people sometimes experience. And I think when we experience these pitfalls, it's because we're really not sure of what to do. And we go down rabbit trails and we get off track and it's hard to come back. So let me just alert you to some common pitfalls. One is the soapbox orator. You use your commentary to express your personal views or frustrations about the profession. And I'm sure that all of us have really experienced some frustrations about our profession these last 11 months. But your commentary is not the place to vent those frustrations. An overarching theme or a tone of doom and gloom. Yeah, it's been rough, but your commentary is not the place to express that roughness. Extensive explanations of why students do not learn. We're not doing that. You are not using your commentary as you are trying to earn your national board certification to be in the top tier, the gold standard of educators, to have any of these soapbox moments. Okay, advance for me one more time. Accomplished teachers do not whine. We maintain a can-do attitude. We use every available resource to provide the best possible learning experience for our students. So two more times, Lisa. So we will not do those things, and we will do these things. Okay, all right. It's a couple of more pitfalls. Let's look at this one. Students were introduced to the concept of multiplication as repeated addition. After a few problems were modeled and discussed to introduce the lesson, students were divided into small groups and provided with manipulative materials to help them solve a set of 5 problems. The students were seated in groups of 4. First, they brainstormed and charted ideas to tackle the problem, and then they selected a specific strategy to use. Each group delivered a plan and shared it when they met together at the end of the period. We discussed the pros and cons of each plan, then selected the one we thought was most promising. We decided, we agreed to, next we, then we. Okay, something's happening here. Something is happening here. Hit me one time, Lisa. Who is the teacher here? Where is the teacher? Who is we? Who made all these things happen? Did they just happen by osmosis? Was there a sub in there? Who put all of this in place so we could do all these things? All right, let's look at, so of course, you will not do that. You will not disappear. You will not fall into the language of we. All right, let's take a look at this one. I assign students to groups of 4 with attention to diversity by mixing students' abilities, learning styles, and genders within a given group. I directed each group to brainstorm ideas for solving the problem, come to a consensus on one idea, and then discuss the pros and cons of the proposed solution. I asked that each group make a chart to share with the larger group at the end of the period. I also reminded students of our group, reminded students of our group rules to make sure everyone would participate equally in the process of developing and sharing the chart. All right. One time. Yeah, okay. So many I statements here. The teacher is here. The teacher is driving. The teacher is in control. The teacher has planned this lesson with these activities that lead from one thing to the next. This teacher has taken into account the students. how they divide them into groups. They talk about that, the abilities, the learning styles, the genders, all of that. The teacher is driving. So describe the specific behaviors and the thinking process to meet the standards for accomplished teaching. So we will use I statements, not we statements. Okay? Lisa, I think you're talking, but I can't hear you.
Thank you. Richard double muted me. If I can chime in here for a quick second, one of the things that I just wanted to name is I think that so many of us in our profession fall prey to this pitfall. A lot of times we are humble. There are gender dynamics at play here sometimes. And so we don't often center ourselves in our work, and it presents as bragging. And so I think that this is a pitfall that many of us fall prey to, and a really important one to call out. So thanks for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's one more. As teachers, just kind of like Lisa was saying, we really expect other teachers to get what we're talking about. We're talking about our practice. Everyone does this. This is the way it is. And this is what we do. Mm-mm. No, ma'am, Pam. No, ma'am, Pam. No, sir. Absolutely not. You do not expect the assessor to connect the dots in the commentary. You say it. You line out every single thing from A to Z. Can be present and actively directing student learning in the entry, but does not adequately explain the thinking process. Okay, you have to give your rationale why. So that second bullet, I see that as being very descriptive, but not being analytical. And your analysis of your practice through reflection and making those connections is really what National Board is about. These teachers think their reasons for what they do in the classroom are so obvious that no explanation is needed. Explain it all. That's what this process is about. Can be veteran teachers who work so capably and intuitively with students, they do not consciously analyze the basis for decision making and reasoning, thinking everybody does this, everybody knows this. We assessors will not intuit, they will read what is written, and if it is not clear, concise, and convincing, then we have missed the mark as candidates. They're not telepaths. Tell them, make those connections. Okay, so we're not going to do any of those bullets. We are going to do what's at the bottom. We will discuss each artifact and sample, telling what the evidence is and why it is significant. We are going to present evidence to make a case. Every claim that we say we do, we're going to give examples and our rationale. All right. So not that, but that. Okay, now you guys, you notice the pattern. So the red is the no-nos, the no-goes, we're not doing, and the green are the things we want to do. Another common pitfall is being a philosopher. We are not going to use our entry to pontificate about the vicissitudes of life and education, or the political arena, or social injustice. We are not doing that. We are here to make the case about our teaching, our students, and to connect all of that in a way that shows accomplished teaching. All right. All right. Okay, now it's probably time for us to lean back, take another deep breath, stretch our neck, because I know that was a lot. Whew. Dr. Allen, you put it on us. Yes, I did, because I want you to be successful. I want you to be successful. So you're probably, again, like on Saturday, saying, man, where do I start? You put a lot on us. Where do I start? So I have something for you. This whole webinar is all about writing. How do you get started in your writing? What are the different kinds of writing? What are the pitfalls? How can you be successful? This writing is not academic writing. If we've all been to college, we all have at least a bachelor's, master's, or more. This writing is not that. It's not that. So I have come across this activity for you to practice different writing prompts. And so it is linked in the note catcher for you. It's going to be a document. When you click it, it's going to ask you to, it's going to force a copy. And these are different descriptive, analytical, and reflective writing prompts. They are super short, but I really think they will benefit you as you start your national board process, or as you are in it and trying to refine your process. So one, I want you to choose a prompt. So as you, oh, Lisa, would you advance one for me? So if you look at this part, it's one under descriptive, it's one under analytical, and it's one under reflective. Now I'm gonna just read this one. So the descriptive is describe your classroom. So set the clock for 10, 12 minutes, no more than 20, and just describe your classroom. Very dragnet. When you walk in my classroom, on the left is this, on the right is this is here, this is here. And then go to the middle prompt, which is analytical. And it says, tell why you organized your classroom in a certain way. So then you can say, well, I put my short bookshelf behind my kidney table because it houses my leveled readers. So when my students are in small guided reading groups, I'm able to turn around and grab what I need. So you're telling the why behind it, okay? So again, set your clock, no more than 20 minutes, get it out. Then I want you to practice on a reflective one. So this reflective writing prompt says, if you were to move to another classroom, how would you set up your classroom? So now you're thinking differently, like, okay, well, what would I do different? What would I do different? What would I do different? And so each one of these, they're all about your classroom setup, but it's asking you different degrees about it. It's going from descriptive to analytical and reflective. So after you do a couple of these, ask somebody to read it and say, hey, is this the same as this one? What's different about it? And then repeat until you get a little comfortable. When you get stuck, I would encourage you to come back to this and to use it. There are several different options here for you to choose from, and just a note about reflective. As accomplished teachers, as candidates going through the process to be an accomplished teacher, when you are reflective, there is always something that you can do better, differently. And if you do it the same, then you're dead professionally. If it's the second verse same as the first every time, it's always room for improvement. So if you don't hear anything else, write that down. There is always room for improvement. You will always do something differently when you are reflecting. Okay, we're ready, Lisa. Okay, so as my segment wraps up, I just want to recap for you what Margaret and I have shared with you tonight. So descriptive, 3 kinds of writing. Descriptive, it tells who, what, when, where, why. Very dragnet, the facts. And then it's analytical. Analytical gets into the thinking. Why? In what way? In what manner? This is where you're really digging into examining your practice. And then last is that reflective writing, that reflective. This is where you have to think about, how'd that go? How'd that work out for me? Did it work? Didn't it work? What am I going to do next time? How am I going to make it better? Did all of my kids get it? You know, you really have to think differently. You are deliberating your future actions, involving assessing, comparing, considering choices. So these are your recaps for your 3 types of writing that we talked about. We also talked about the instructional context, and Lisa, you can just click. It's about some 4 or 5 things that are going to pop up here. So as you are writing your writing tips, you want to use your standards and your rubric, because that's where you get what strong writing is. And your evidence-based writing, you want to go back to those 5 core props and your double helix, that architecture of accomplished teaching, to really get that evidence-based writing. Use those questions. Don't just tell me what happened, show me. Spell it out, A to Z, leave nothing to chance. And then those common pitfalls. We talked about 4 things that we will not do ever, and then how you can avoid them. All right. Next one. I think that is the end of, oh, no. Oh, and lastly, the writing activity. So do try your hand at the writing activity. We always like to leave you with something that is actionable for you, and this writing activity is very actionable for you. All right, I think that